And a great pleasure to have joining us today a man who has written a book called Money Well Spent, The Truth Behind the $1 Trillion Stimulus, the biggest economic recovery plan in history. He's a reporter for ProPublica.com, also contributes to USA Today, NPR, MSNBC, and the CBS Evening News. We're joined by Michael Grabell today. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, I guess that's the actual title of the bill that went through. I just remember kind of covering it a little bit from down here in Florida, Michael. Just the controversy over watching both parties fight over this, and a lot of hashing out went into finally before it was put through. That was a lot of work just to get it through, and even then both sides weren't happy with it, right?
Yeah, and this has sort of become I say in the book, one of the most reviled pieces of legislation in recent history. Democrats. Some Democrats say it prevented a second Great Depression. Others say it wasn't enough, and there was a big flaw in that. Republicans say it's a flop full of pork projects. So I think it's been difficult for the public to know what to make of the stimulus package. And so one of my goals in writing the book was to get out of Washington, get out of this sort of chatter back and forth, and actually go on the ground and talk to people and see, look at the product, see how the money was spent, see if these the hardest hit places, the middle class workers were really affected or not affected by the stimulus package.
You talk in the book about both the successes of it, and obviously there's been failures in it as well. Can you give a couple of examples of what good has come out of it?
Sure. Nonpartisan economic forecasting firms have generally been in agreement crediting the stimulus with more than 2 million jobs. There was this buzz around clean energy, which we had never seen before, and we now have a battery industry in the U.S. For electric cars. This was something, when I talked to the plant owners, they said if we didn't have the stimulus money, we'd be building these plants overseas. This small amount of money for Race to the Top cost 32 states to pass some major education reforms. Obviously very controversial, but things that the administration had hoped to achieve and got a lot of bang for the buck out of a small amount of money. When all is said and done, we've got 41,000 miles of roads paved and improved, 600,000 homes weatherized, and 3,000 rural schools connected to high-speed internet. That said, despite all this spending and all these, these achievements, we're still, at 8.3% unemployment rate. We're looking at 13 million unemployed. So there's still, kind of a major problems and things that I think the administration didn't expect and the public did not expect in going into this.
And most of, or not most, but I mean, what would you say the percentage of those jobs that were created? Were they mostly temporary, since there were construction jobs that would end after a certain time, or were they what you want to call permanent jobs, if you can use that term?
It was a combination. It was a combination. You saw, a big chunk of this is teachers' jobs who were saved.
Mm-hmm.
So the teacher who didn't get laid off, and people don't notice that. Construction workers. The big thing here is, construction by nature is a series of temporary jobs. So these are some temporary jobs brought in. In a lot of cases, they tied the industry over until things could pick up a little bit. If you look at, when I looked at the data for this on the construction industry, almost every sector plummeted during the recession except for public road and highway building. So it was really interesting to see that.
Mm. What was your process of kind of getting the information? Was the government officials helpful to you, or how do you go about getting that specific information?
In some ways, I mean, obviously, the front door to the White House was not open for me. I had written very critical stories about the stimulus, but but individual advisors were very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
When I approached them individually, they were willing to speak to me both on background and on the record in the book, and tell me some of these inside details about the negotiations and the horse trading that was going on in Congress and the difficulties within the White House economic team to come to an agreement on what a stimulus would be. And there was this plan back in the fall of 2009 to try to pass more stimulus money, another stimulus package. But it was ultimately, the economic team could not come to an agreement, and there was a sense that healthcare was a priority, and that they could go around fighting endlessly because healthcare was going to take the priority, and there was no reality of bringing another bill to Congress on this.
Now we throw around, the amount of money that was spent in the package here. Does anybody ever tell you exactly where that money came from, or is it printed money, or borrowed money, or a combination?
It's borrowed money.
Mm-hmm.
It's all borrowed money. Right. If you look at right now it is a big contributor to our annual deficits, but by I think 2014 it kind of fades away. You don't see it being a long-term problem for our deficit.
It won't affect it that much, then, in your opinion.
Well, that's the opinion of the Congressional Budget Office,
Mm-hmm.
which is supposed to be nonpartisan.
Right.
You hear a lot about this is going to sacrifice a generation of our family. We're going to become indentured to China or whatever we keep spending. And long term, if we keep spending and keep borrowing from China, that there are some long term effects of that. The stimulus is believed by these forecasters to be kind of a short term addition to the deficit.
Yeah, I know you talk a little bit in the book about kind of comparing this stimulus back to back when FDR was in office and during the Depression at that time, kind of the Work Project Act, I guess it was called WPA, that created a lot of jobs, almost similar to what this one did. Can you compare the two? I guess this one is obviously much bigger in scope, but maybe by inflation standards, is it similar?
So by inflation standards, the stimulus was still 5 times bigger than the WPA.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the numbers, and this was bigger than the moon race, bigger than the Manhattan Project, bigger than the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe after World War II. So a really major thing in history. One of the things, if you look at WPA, they directly hired, I believe, 8 million people for a cost that was less than the stimulus package, which is credited with saving or creating 2 million jobs. So there was less efficiency in this compared to the direct hiring we saw with the WPA roles.
I know just one of the things people were kind of making fun of at the time, part of the stimulus was the Cash for Clunkers program. I know you're right about that as well, and I guess that became almost a joke at the time. But was that a good thing, or was that one of the things that did not work well?
Well, what we saw was this tremendous frenzy of activity. Essentially, no one was spending any money in the spring and summer of 2009. Everything had kind of locked down, and they came out with this Cash for Clunkers program, and all of a sudden you see this frenzy of activity. The car dealers doing their ads on TV, putting cars into dumpsters as a way to attract people there, and all of a sudden the dealer lots are cleaned out, and the automakers react by bringing back workers onto the assembly line. Now, this is a very good, short-term stimulus, but as a long-term thing, it essentially pulled car sales forward that would have happened anyway over the next year. So it's certainly not a long-term solution, and environmentally, it had less. In talking to the experts on this, it had less bang for the buck environmentally than could have with a program that had higher emission goals. One of the kind of jokes about this program was that you could still buy a Hummer and qualify as getting a more environmentally friendly car.
I know we have limited time today, Michael, but can you kind of capsulize, in a sense, politically, the impact of it right now? Obviously, we're in an election year as we talk now in late February. Was this a good thing for President Obama, or neutral, or what do you think?
Well, a lot of it right now. It's certainly been a negative thing. The Republican groups have certainly used it in ads a lot more than Democrats are using it to boast about its successes. I think as the GOP nominations kind of wrap up over the next few months, we'll see this turn to looking at the economy as a central issue in this election, and looking at how the administration handled the economic recession and kind of struggling recovery, and the stimulus is going to be the lens, I think, to view how well the administration did. So I think in looking at this book, it'll be kind of a good guide for people to sort out these facts as they hear various different political talking points in debates and in the campaign ads.
Well, a lot to think about this year for a lot of people, and this book gives some good answers. And if you wonder what happened to the $1 trillion, money well spent, I'll give you some of those answers. The truth behind the $1 trillion stimulus, the biggest economic recovery plan in history. We've been talking with the book's author, Michael Grabell, today. And Michael, you have a website I want to direct people to get the book?
Sure. They can look at www.michaelgrabell.com. And they can also go on ProPublica's website, www.propublica.org.
That's Grabell, just to spell your last name there. And Michael, appreciate you taking a few minutes today, and we look forward to perhaps talking to you down the road. But good job on this one. You made at least someone who's not really a financial expert understand it. So I think that's a goal you achieved.
Thank you very much.
Good talking to you, Michael. Thanks for being with us.